Hey guys, tonight we are headed up a mountain. No, not one of those cozy forested hills with a scenic overlook. This one is Olympus, the kind of mountaintop where the clouds stick around not because it's cold but because no one remembered to turn off the lightning machine. Marble columns lean at slightly suspicious angles, the sky flickers with static, and you can just make out a golden gate that definitely creaks every time someone passive-aggressively slams it. Welcome to the not-so-glamorous home of the gods. You'll be staying a while, though honestly, you probably won't survive this if you forget to bow to Hera. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where, and when, you're drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive on Olympus through what looks suspiciously like the side entrance. There's no grand welcome, just the rustle of someone's toga brushing past a laurel bush and the faint sound of bickering. The gods, it turns out, are always bickering. There's a schedule posted to a pitted bronze column, titled, "Meeting Agenda Mandatory," and beneath it, some poor nymph has tried to cross out the word mandatory 17 times. You drift past Hermes arguing with Apollo about parking his sun chariot too close to the Amphora recycling. Apollo, hair shimmering like a shampoo commercial, insists he measured the distance. Hermes replies that time and space are loose concepts, and walks off mid-sentence. You're not even sure where to look. There's Dionysus asleep on a throne made of grapevines, Athena whispering strategy to an owl, and Zeus, well, Zeus is looming. He does that. Mount Olympus isn't all glittering halls and triumphant orchestras. It's more like a divine high school reunion on a loop. Every god has their clique, their preferred throne height, their list of mortal favorites. You step around a scorch mark labeled, "Do not step here again," and make your way deeper in. Mainstream history often describes Olympus as a lofty paradise in the sky, where the gods ruled with elegant authority. But that's generous. Historians still argue whether the whole floating palace in the clouds was meant metaphorically or literally. Was it a real mountain, or an allegorical plane for divine influence? What they all agree on is that the idea of Mount Olympus as an unreachable height wasn't just geography, it was branding. The truth is, Olympus works more like a dysfunctional neighborhood association. Zeus is technically in charge, but like any HOA president, he mainly just yells when someone puts up a fence he didn't approve. Hera oversees moral hygiene and signs off on official curses. Poseidon keeps flooding the East Wing plumbing during tantrums. And someone, probably Hermes, keeps rerouting the nectar delivery as a prank. It smells faintly of burnt olive oil and ego. You watch as Ares struts down the hall in full armor, only to be told by Athena that the war meeting was yesterday. Ares huffs. The columns tremble slightly. The architecture here is beautiful but clearly built by a mortal committee. Doric columns sit awkwardly next to Corinthian scrollwork, and there's an ongoing battle over whether gold statues of Zeus should outnumber ones of Athena. Spoiler, they always do. Guess who votes last? Off to one side, you notice an empty pedestal. It's labeled Hestia, the goddess of the hearth. She gave up her throne to avoid the drama, possibly the most relatable move in all of myth. Instead, she tends the eternal flame in a back corridor, quietly feeding it olive twigs and pointedly not getting involved. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit: there was allegedly a lesser gate into Olympus guarded not by Cerberus or a wall of fire, but by a minor wind spirit named Boreas, who was often late and extremely into harp music. Some fringe texts even describe a sort of guest pass system for heroes, which explains how guys like Hercules and Perseus kept showing up uninvited. You're halfway through the grand central atrium when you trip over something that turns out to be a baby boar wearing a tiny helmet. No one claims it. A passing dryad mutters, "Ares again," and you both pretend it didn't happen. There are no elevators. You walk. A lot. The air is thinner, not just from altitude but from the sheer volume of divine sighs and long-suffering groans. You start to notice that each god has personalized their corner of Olympus. Artemis has a moonlit forest nook with hunting trophies and arrows in neat rows. Aphrodite has a beachside lounging area complete with shell-shaped chairs and a constant perfume breeze. Zeus, unsurprisingly, has the largest throne. It's literally bolted to a cloud formation, hovers a little, and crackles ominously whenever someone gossips near it. The official rule is, no sitting unless you're Zeus. But the unofficial rule is, definitely don't sit unless you want to be a squirrel for a week. You find a quiet spot near the lesser reflecting pool. The water is crystal clear and seems to whisper mildly judgmental things. Probably enchanted. You lean back and try to understand the organizational structure here, only to realize there isn't one. Immortal beings don't do HR. They do vendettas and eternal grudges disguised as prophecies. And yet, somehow, the chaos functions. The seasons change. The mortals below get inspired or punished. The wine never runs out. You watch as Apollo passes by again, playing the same song for the third time today, and you finally understand, Olympus isn't a divine palace. It's a cosmic sitcom. And you, lucky you, just got a front row seat. You barely have time to settle in before the skies rumble again, not with a storm exactly, but with that telltale crackle of someone dramatic making an entrance. Zeus. Of course it's Zeus. He doesn't walk so much as materialize, like a pop-up ad you forgot you signed up for. 1 second the clouds are whispering about some mortal sacrifice gone wrong, and the next, there he is, bearded, broad-shouldered, and visibly glowing. Thunder curls around his ankles. His robe is billowing even though there's no wind. You're pretty sure the birds in the trees were paid to scatter on cue. This, dear listener, is Zeus, king of the gods, lord of the sky, and possibly the least emotionally stable figure in all of Greek mythology. You'd think with immortality, unlimited power, and a solid sky throne, he'd be content. But no. Zeus is what happens when you give a toddler a lightning bolt and say, "Here, govern the universe." He roams Olympus like he owns the place, which, technically, he does, but the vibe is less, benevolent ruler, and more. That boss who keeps starting personal stories during meetings. He has a habit of yelling people's full names when angry and casually shape-shifting when cornered. You pass a mural where he's turned into a swan, another where he's a bull, and one particularly unsettling one where he appears to be a light mist. Historians still argue whether these transformations were strategic, symbolic, or just Zeus being Zeus. You duck behind a marble column as he strides past. He's mid-rant about someone misusing his lightning scepter, which he claims is not a toy unless I say it is. Hera trails behind him, arms crossed, muttering something about yet another mortal woman. It's a whole thing. Again. A historical fact worth noting, Zeus didn't inherit Olympus. He took it. After being hidden away as a baby to avoid being swallowed by his dad. Because Greek parenting, he eventually led a rebellion against the Titans. This epic family drama, the Titanomachy, ended with Zeus and his siblings becoming the new pantheon. You might think such a victory would instill humility. You would be wrong. Zeus' divine responsibilities technically include law, order, and justice. But you quickly learn that justice, around here, is flexible. When a mortal offends him, they might get turned into an antelope, or a constellation, or just smote. When a god offends him? Usually a strongly worded thunderstorm followed by a holiday in Crete. There's no consistency, just vibes. You pass by the official complaint box, which is actually a cracked amphora with "For Zeus' eyes only" painted in glittery script. It's overflowing. Nearby, a minor wind god is dictating a letter aloud about how constant sky thunder at 3 a.m. violates the communal sleep agreement. No one seems hopeful. A quirky tidbit scholars occasionally mention, though some call it fringe, is that Zeus once tried to create a mortal legal system by appointing a dozen law spirits, called Themis. The plan backfired when they unionized and started charging consultation fees. Whether or not this really happened, there's a faintly passive-aggressive statue of Themis holding an empty scroll labeled, "Try again, Zeus." Of course, His biggest legacy isn't war or law, it's the gods he created. Zeus has children with nearly everyone. Mortal queens, goddesses, nymphs, and in one ambiguous myth, possibly a piece of rain. Each child has a story, a purpose, or at least a niche power. Athena, born from his forehead. Apollo and Artemis from Leto. Persephone, maybe. Dionysus, definitely, but not through traditional means. We'll get there. You glance toward a hallway lined with portraits of his offspring. It's less a gallery and more a paternity test with mood lighting. He pauses now, halfway up a staircase to nowhere, waving his arm grandly and declaring something about mortal reverence. A group of lesser gods roll their eyes. One of them coughs suspiciously in the word narcissist. What's fascinating is how many statues of Zeus exist outside Olympus. Archaeologists have found hundreds across the ancient world, from Greece to modern-day Turkey and beyond. But even more intriguing, many of those statues depict him holding lightning in one hand and a bored expression in the other. Historians still debate whether this was intentional irony or just marble fatigue. You wander into his personal temple. It's excessive. Giant tapestries of sky battles, a thunderbolt collection on velvet cushions, and at least 3 golden thrones, 1 for serious decrees, 1 for mildly dramatic announcements, and 1 labeled thinking chair, do not move. You sit on none of them. A rooster crows. Indoors. No one flinches. Zeus once claimed it was his divine alarm, and now it just lives here. Somewhere off in the distance, you hear a mortal priest calling for rain. Zeus sighs, snaps his fingers, and a small cloud drops an underwhelming drizzle. Task completed. And here's where things shift. For all his case, Zeus is still oddly lonely. At least, that's what a few fringe texts suggest. Beneath the Sky Daddy bravado and booming declarations is a god who craves attention not just from mortals, but from his own family, most of whom are actively trying to avoid him. Even his marriage to Hera is tense at best. More on her next. But know this, while Zeus rules the heavens, he doesn't always know what to do with quiet. He thrives on noise, worship, crisis. It's the only way he feels real. As you slip out of his temple, a crack of lightning hits a bush beside you, not harmful, just enough to make your hair frizz. Zeus laughs in the distance. Classic. Not sweeping in on clouds or thundering down halls, but walking, measured, regal, terrifying in the way of calm. We need to talk. Text message is terrifying. Hera doesn't do grand entrances. She is the entrance. Wherever she steps, others make space. And not out of affection, though she has her loyal followers, but out of sheer, bone-deep awareness that she sees everything and forgets nothing. You watch her pass by a marble basin. She pauses, adjusts a curl, and stares down her own reflection like it owes her money. Her robes are stitched with stars, her posture stiffer than an angry librarian's, and you swear the air smells faintly of pomegranate and court summons. Hera, queen of the gods. Goddess of marriage, women, childbirth, and, let's be real, cold, calculated vengeance. She is not a sidekick to Zeus, she is his equal, though you'd be forgiven for not noticing that in the drama-filled myths that mostly focus on who he's chasing next. Hera is the storm that follows the affair, the awkward family dinner after the prophecy, the one who knows and never lets you forget it. You trail behind her, careful not to make a sound. Hera does not like surprises. A mainstream historical fact worth whispering: the cult of Hera predates most of the Olympians' PR teams. Her worship goes way back. Mycenaean-era artifacts bear her name, and her sanctuaries, especially the one at Argos, were ancient even in classical times. She wasn't just Zeus's wife. She was a titan of her own, a powerful figure long before their union gave the mythologists new material to gossip about. She enters her private court. Not a temple, not a throne room. This is more like a celestial office, where grudges are filed alphabetically and prayers are reviewed under a quartz magnifier. You hover near the doorway, pretending to examine a tapestry of Io being turned into a cow. Classic. Now, Hera's reputation has suffered from some bad press. In most myths, she's cast as jealous, vengeful, unforgiving. Which, fair. She did send a giant crab to attack Heracles mid-fight. And yes, she cursed Echo to only repeat what others said. And then there's the time she turned a rival into a bear. Or was it Artemis who did that? Historians still argue whether the bear thing was Hera's doing or just another case of mythological scapegoating. The gods' timelines are notoriously messy. But look closer, and there's a different story. Hera isn't petty. She's methodical. Where Zeus is all thunder and impulse, Hera is strategy. Where he throws tantrums, she throws consequences. You begin to suspect that she's the only Olympian who ever reads the fine print on divine contracts. You pass a wall filled with golden wedding bands, each one representing a divine or mortal union she's either blessed, sabotaged, or claimed jurisdiction over. Marriage is her domain, and she guards it with a ferocity that's, well, kind of ironic, considering her own. Her marriage to Zeus is a case study in divine irony. They fight constantly. He lies constantly. She schemes, but also stays. It's hard to call it love, exactly. It's more like an ancient version of, we can't stand each other but also we've merged our insurance. You pause near a basin of sacred water. Rumor has it she uses it to monitor vows broken by mortals, like a mythological lie detector. Some fringe interpretations even claim she has a calendar of all unfaithful mortals, complete with celestial color coding. Whether that's true or not, you believe it. There's a sparkle in her eye that suggests she doesn't miss much. She's reviewing petitions now. A dryad wants revenge on a cheating satyr. A mortal woman begs for her husband to return from sea. A priest requests more funding for his temple. Hera signs the third one. The first two get a long stare and are set aside in a pending retribution tray. There's something hypnotic about her stillness. Other gods fidget. She doesn't. You realize this is what real power looks like. Not showy, not loud. Just present, immovable. Like granite that learned to smile politely. Here's a quirky tidbit you wouldn't expect. Some ancient versions of Hera's myth describe her not as merely Zeus's counterpart, but as the earth itself, an embodiment of the fertile ground, the sacred order. Theories swirl around whether she was once a mother goddess entirely independent of any sky god. And honestly, that tracks. You edge around her court, careful not to catch her gaze. The last thing you want is to end up in one of those weird myths where someone gets turned into a shrub because they sneezed during a divine judgment. From a balcony, she gazes down at the mortal world. You follow her line of sight. There's a city celebrating her festival, dancers in white robes, women weaving garlands, a statue cleaned with oils. She doesn't smile, exactly. But she nods. Approval, rare and fleeting. And then she says something. Quiet, just loud enough for the wind to carry it. He'll never learn. You're not sure if she means Zeus, or one of the mortals, or maybe all of them. You feel it echo through you like a small bell struck deep in your chest. There's a lot of talk among scholars about her motives. Why she stays with Zeus, why she punishes the women rather than him, why she seems so invested in human fidelity. Some say it's hypocrisy. Others argue it's trauma. But historians still debate whether Hera's behavior is a reflection of divine order, human projection, or just a really, really long game. She walks past you again, robes rustling like ocean waves on marble. For a moment, you think she's going to speak. She doesn't. But she knows you're there. She always knows. You make a mental note never to lie again, even in small things. Just in case. You drift away from Hera's cold orbit, your footsteps echoing softer now as the palace halls stretch wider. The light shifts too, warmer somehow, like sunset caught in amber, and before long, the ground under your feet seems to hum. Not with thunder or vengeance, but with metal. You've found your way to Hephaestus. The forge isn't hidden, but it feels tucked away, like someone built the rest of Olympus around it just to keep the noise down. You're greeted by the scent of scorched olive wood and molten bronze. It clings to the air like incense, thick and purposeful. Sparks flash through the columns ahead, like fireflies on espresso. This is where the magic, or, more accurately, the engineering, happens. Hephaestus, god of fire and craftsmanship, is hammering away at something that looks suspiciously like a golden Segway. You're not here to judge the god himself? Not what you expect. Hephaestus isn't statuesque or glowing. He's stocky, soot-streaked, and visibly limping. His tools hang from a belt that looks more worn than divine. He doesn't glide like the others. He lurches, favors one leg, and grunts at his work like it's personally insulted him. But when he lifts his hammer, the world seems to hold its breath. And here's your first historical grounding. Hephaestus was one of the few gods the Greeks consistently described as physically flawed. His limp was never hidden or glossed over. It was baked into his myth. In a society that idolized physical perfection, his popularity was a strange little rebellion. A reminder that power didn't always come in photogenic packages. You hear a hiss as metal meets water, steam hissing up in a fragrant cloud of cedar and iron. He looks up for just a moment, and gives you a grunt that might be a greeting. You nod back, as reverently as possible while covered in Olympus dust, and trying not to sneeze. Now, Hephaestus didn't exactly get the warmest welcome into the world. In one version, Hera, appalled by his deformity, flung him off Olympus at birth. In another, it was Zeus who did the flinging after Hephaestus dared to intervene in one of their many spats. Either way, the god of fire crash-landed, some say on Lemnos, others say into the sea. Historians still argue whether the exile story is metaphorical, allegorical, or just an awkward attempt to explain why he lived under Olympus. But down there, banished, bruised, broken, he built. That's the secret strength of Hephaestus. He doesn't rage like Ares or plot like Hera. He crafts. He invents. He's the reason the gods have thrones, weapons, jewelry, automatic wine-pouring devices. Yes, those were real, and possibly the first prototype of Syria embedded into a chariot wheel. Some fringe scholars suggest Hephaestus was based on ancient fire cults, mortal smiths who were revered and feared for controlling flame and forging tools. There's even a theory that his temples doubled as early factories, complete with sacred kilns and priest artisans. Whether or not that's true, walking his forge feels like entering the oldest kind of cathedral, one built not to worship, but to make. He gestures at a set of golden statues near the wall. You squint, they're moving. Slowly. Gracefully. Automatons. Hephaestus was always ahead of the curve. Da Vinci sketches? Cute. This guy made robotic helpers thousands of years ago, and programmed them with divine etiquette. One of them turns to offer you a tray of figs. You take one. It tastes like burned honey and ambition. Now, on to his marriage. Yes. That one. Hephaestus is married to Aphrodite. You blink. You blink again. Yes, that Aphrodite. The literal goddess of love and beauty. It's the kind of pairing that makes you double-check your notes. Hephaestus, sweaty and soot-covered, married to someone described by poets as so dazzling it causes sea foam to blush. You'd think this was a cosmic rom-com, but no. It was a trap. According to most myths, Zeus married them off to prevent conflict. Because every god on Olympus had a crush on Aphrodite, and things were getting awkward. Aphrodite was not consulted. The result? An uncomfortable divine sitcom. Hephaestus, loyal and devoted. Aphrodite, not even trying to hide her affairs with Ares, god of war. The gossip writes itself. And yet, Hephaestus never explodes. He doesn't curse her or start wars. He builds a net. A nearly invisible trap, spun from gold so fine it can't be seen. One night, he catches the lovers mid-escapade and publicly traps them, inviting the gods to witness the humiliation. Savage? Absolutely. Passive-aggressive? 10 out of 10. But also kind of brilliant. You peek at the corner of the forge where that infamous net hangs. It sparkles faintly, catching light like a web spun by someone who remembers everything. He wipes his brow and gets back to work. A war chariot? A necklace that sings? You can't tell. Hephaestus is always a dozen projects deep, his mind whirring faster than Olympus can keep up with. And for all his gruffness, there's something profoundly peaceful about being here. Maybe it's the rhythm. Maybe it's the honesty of fire and metal. No games, no seduction, just cause and effect. You hammer, you shape, you cool. You fail, you adjust, you try again. One thing's clear: Hephaestus is Olympus' backbone. He builds what the others use. He fixes what they break. He sees beauty not in faces, but in function, in process, in the act of shaping chaos into order. He lights another fire, and the shadows on the wall dance again. Heroes, monsters, myths. And behind it all, the man with the limp, holding the hammer. You leave the forge slowly, like backing away from a lion that's too busy reading a book to notice you. The warmth of Hephaestus' fires trails behind you, gradually giving way to the soft hush of open air. The wind smells different here, sweeter, drier, and tinged with salt. Somewhere in the distance, waves hush themselves against invisible shores. You blink against the glow, and there she is, Aphrodite. You try not to stare. You fail immediately. She's lounging on what can only be described as a divine recliner sculpted from seafoam and rose quartz, framed by fluttering curtains that defy gravity for aesthetic purposes. Her hair tumbles in lazy waves like it's being fluffed by invisible cherubs. You get the distinct feeling she hasn't walked anywhere in centuries. Why would she? Even the marble seems to soften for her footsteps. Aphrodite doesn't look up as you approach. She knows you're there. She always knows. The air around her shimmers faintly, either it's enchanted, or she's just that good at lighting. Now, Aphrodite's myth is a case study in the chaos of origins. Mainstream sources will tell you she was born from sea foam, specifically the sea foam that bubbled up when Uranus, the sky god, had his bits lopped off and hurled into the ocean. Yep. We're doing genital-based mythological genesis now. And yet, in other myths, she's the daughter of Zeus and Dione, which is much more corporate internship than primordial blood magic. Historians still argue whether these two versions represent separate goddesses or a merging of regional beliefs into one stunningly complicated icon. Regardless of how she arrived, Aphrodite wasted no time becoming the center of everyone's emotional dysfunction. Love, beauty, lust, these are her tools. And she uses them with terrifying precision. She isn't about hearts and flowers. She's about obsession. Longing. That slow, consuming ache that makes poets go blind and kings start wars over a misplaced scarf. You inch closer. Her mirror floats beside her, suspended by doves that do not flap, just glide lazily in circles. She watches you watching her and finally speaks, her voice like velvet dipped in sarcasm. I'm not just a pretty face, you know. You mumble something vaguely respectful. She smirks. You're not the first to be tongue-tied in her presence. Probably not even the 100th today. It's easy to forget that Aphrodite's influence wasn't confined to romantic misadventures. Entire cities worshipped her, not just as a beauty queen, but as a powerful protector, a goddess of sailors, gardens, and even war in certain local cults. Cyprus, Corinth, and Cythera all had massive temples in her name. In some depictions, she even wore armor. That's right, goddess of love, yes, but also battle-ready. Aphrodite doesn't just break hearts. She crushes them, sometimes literally. You sit near the edge of her dais, careful not to spill any divine glitter that's definitely not biodegradable. One of her attendants, possibly mortal, possibly enchantment, brings her a drink in a pearl goblet. She sips without looking. Do you know what love really is? She asks, almost wistfully. You pause. You do not, in fact, know what love really is. Control, she answers for you. Desire, longing, vulnerability, all very useful. But control, now that's the power nobody expects. She's not wrong. Her most famous moment in Greek myth? The Judgment of Paris. 3 goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, Each offer bribes to a mortal prince, asking him to judge who's the fairest. Hera offers power. Athena offers wisdom. Aphrodite? She offers Helen of Troy, the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris picks love. And boom, 10 years of war, the fall of Troy, and centuries of cultural trauma. Aphrodite doesn't lift a sword. She doesn't have to. Aphrodite twirls a lock of hair, watching you over her shoulder. And yet they call me shallow. She sighs deeply, dramatically, as if burdened by everyone else's failure to understand how exhausting it is to be this magnetic. You believe her. It does look exhausting. And here's a quirky little tidbit for your sleep-hungry brain. In some fringe stories, Aphrodite wasn't always a goddess. A few rare accounts suggest she was a mortal woman elevated to divinity because the gods themselves couldn't resist her. Imagine being so beautiful you glitch the pantheon and get promoted to Olympus. Classic myth resume padding. You find yourself wondering about her marriage. Hephaestus and Aphrodite. How does that even function? The answer mostly is not well. She spends more time with Ares than her husband. Everyone knows it. No one really does anything about it, except Hephaestus, who, as you'll remember, went full mechanical surveillance mode. You bring it up. She laughs. A small, almost nostalgic sound. Poor thing, she says, not unkindly. He tried to understand me with blueprints. Love doesn't work like that. Then she pauses, and her voice dips softer, silkier. But sometimes, I wish it did. You sit in silence after that, not wanting to break the spell. The doves circle again, the perfume in the air shifts toward vanilla and sea salt, and the shimmer dims just a little. She's tired, maybe? Or bored? Or both? Aphrodite waves you off with a languid gesture. Go now. You've stared long enough. Besides, you smell like forged smoke. You stand, bow, clumsily, and back away into the marble halls once again, dazed, slightly dazzled, and starting to understand why whole cities collapsed over the shape of a cheekbone. You wander away, still tasting rosewater and subtle judgment, when the air around you shifts once more. The breeze stiffens, the warmth fades, and you swear you hear the distant clank of sandals and the rattle of bronze. The scent of perfume and polished marble gives way to leather straps, sweat, and iron. You're not even sure how the lighting changed, but suddenly, everything feels like it's preparing for a fistfight. You've entered Ares' domain. The architecture here is functional. That's the polite word. No trailing vines or dreamy cushions. It's columns, torches, and what might be a literal bloodstain dried onto the flagstones. You don't ask. You keep moving slowly, like a substitute teacher trying not to startle a classroom full of wolves. And there he is, Ares, god of war. Or, more accurately, war's sweaty, overconfident older brother who didn't quite understand the assignment but still showed up shirtless. He's leaning against the wall, chewing on something vaguely animalistic, looking like he just walked out of a slow-motion music video. You clear your throat. He doesn't look at you. Instead, he throws a dagger, casually, like someone flicking a remote, and it lands, quivering, in the eye of a statue across the room. You're 87% sure that wasn't luck. Now here's the twist. Ares, despite being the god of war, wasn't exactly beloved by the Greeks. He represented chaotic warfare, rage, violence, destruction. The messy stuff. The brawls in back alleys, not the chess game of strategy. That job, as you'll learn later, belonged to Athena. Ares was more. Punch first, yell second, think never. And yet, he's not stupid. That's the surprising part. Sure, his myths are full of him getting humiliated, caught in Aphrodite's love net, wounded by mortals in the Trojan War, even chained up by giants once. But the Greeks didn't write him off entirely. He represented the parts of battle that you couldn't tidy up, the screaming, the adrenaline, the absolute chaos when formations break and instincts take over. Historians still argue whether Ares was a necessary evil or simply the embodiment of the Greeks' own discomfort with the violence they relied on. After all, they worshipped him, built shrines, even named cities after him, Ares had a cult following in Sparta, where his brutal energy was practically considered a civic virtue. He finally turns to look at you. You feel it in your spine. His eyes don't glow, they burn. But not like fire. Like the moment before a brawl begins. That low, electric hum of too much testosterone and nowhere to put it. Lost? He asks, voice like gravel scraping a blade. You consider answering. But he's already moved on, cracking his knuckles and stomping toward a training dummy that's clearly seen better centuries. With a grunt, he slams his shield into it, sending splinters flying. You flinch. And yet there's something kind of hypnotic about it. His movements are instinctual, not rehearsed. Brutal, yes, but honest? Ares doesn't scheme. He doesn't pretend. He doesn't hide his anger behind poisoned honey or divine riddles. What you see is exactly what you get. And what you get is a full-throttle embodiment of rage, unchecked masculinity, and the distinct smell of old leather and crushed ambition. You remember his connection to Aphrodite. It's a tale scribbled in the margins of divine gossip scrolls, how the goddess of love kept choosing the god of war. Not once, not flukes. Regularly. Repeatedly. Because apparently opposites don't just attract, they collide. She had a husband, remember, and yet it was Ares who shared her bed, her secrets, even her children. Yes, there were kids. Deimos and Phobos, twins who represented terror and panic. Not exactly baby shower material, but hey, it tracks. There's a fringe theory that this pairing symbolized something larger, how love and war are constantly entwined. One begets the other. You fight for what you love. You fall in love with the thrill of conquest. Aphrodite and Ares weren't mismatched. They were inevitable. You ask Ares about it. He snorts. She liked the armor. You choose to believe him. And then, because this is Ares, and subtlety is not a currency he trades in, he offers you a spear. You hesitate. He frowns. Not like he's angry. Like he's disappointed. You take it. It's heavier than you expect. The wood worn, the tip glinting faintly. He nods, almost approvingly. Now throw it. You do. Badly. It wobbles and lands with all the drama of a wet sock. Ares doesn't laugh. He just sighs and walks past you. Stick to watching, he mutters. You don't take it personally. He's the kind of guy who probably critiques sunrise technique. What you do take is a feeling, a strange understanding of why people followed this god, why warriors invoked his name before battle. Not because they liked him, but because in the worst moments of fear and blood, you don't pray to someone nice. You pray to someone like Ares. As you leave, the air lightens. Just slightly. You realize you've been clenching your jaw the whole time. Your palms are sweaty. You glance down. The dagger Ares threw earlier? Still there, perfectly embedded in stone. You feel like you just walked out of a bar fight you didn't start, but somehow still lost. You shuffle onward, limbs still humming from the aftershocks of Ares' energy, when something shifts in the corridor. The stone beneath your feet smooths out, the walls narrow, and a scent, like aged paper and olive oil, drifts through the air. There's less clang and more hush now, as if the very atmosphere expects you to quiet down and pay attention. You're entering sacred territory, the kind where yelling is replaced by whispering, and whispering feels like too much. Ahead, a soft glow, no torches this time, but pale light trickling down through cracks in the ceiling, filtering through dust like a slow snowfall. You step into it, and there she is, Athena. She's not seated, not lounging, not even particularly still. She's pacing, reading, thinking, doing that thing where her eyes scan several planes of reality at once. There's a shield strapped to her back, a spear propped casually in the crook of her arm, and an owl perched nearby on a pedestal that's way too fancy to be for just any bird. Athena doesn't look up at first. She already knows you're there. The corners of her mouth twitch just slightly. Finally, she murmurs, as if she's been waiting for you for years and you're late to your own destiny. Athena, goddess of wisdom and warfare. The war part, though, is the strategic kind. While Ares charges into battle screaming, Athena is drawing blueprints, calculating wind direction, and psychologically destroying her opponent before the fight even starts. She's the goddess of chess players, engineers, philosophers, basically anyone who's ever said. Actually, let's think this through. Her origin story? A literal headache. Zeus, after swallowing the pregnant Titaness Métis, long story, involves a prophecy and some deeply bad parenting instincts, developed the mother of all migraines. So naturally, he asks Hephaestus to crack his skull open with an axe. Out pops Athena, fully grown and already armored. No diapers, no training wheels, just instant goddess, like some divine Amazon Prime delivery. Historians still argue whether this myth was a metaphor for intellect triumphing over instinct, or simply the Greeks' extremely weird way of avoiding maternal involvement in the birth of a very masculine-coded goddess. Either way, it's unforgettable. And a bit terrifying. Imagine bursting into the world already holding a weapon. She finally looks at you now, and it's like being X-rayed. Her gaze doesn't judge, it assesses. Calculates. Files your soul into a drawer for later reference. You stammer a greeting. She nods once. I've been reviewing your path, she says. It's a mess. You start to apologize, but she raises a hand. No shame in wandering. Only in refusing to learn. A pause. Let's see what you've gathered so far. And just like that, the owl hoots and flaps over, dropping a scroll at your feet. It unfurls on its own. You blink, realizing it's tracking your journey through the gods. Every encounter, every whisper, every side-eye from a deity. Athena doesn't smile exactly, but there's the faintest glimmer of approval in her eyes. And then she starts to speak, not in lecture mode, but like she's telling you a story, one she knows by heart. There's a reason I rarely appear in myths as someone's love interest. She begins, walking now, hands clasped behind her back. I don't play that game. I was born outside of it. Indeed, Athena was always the odd one out on Olympus. A virgin goddess, yes, but more importantly, someone who actively opted out of romantic entanglements. Not because she was above it, but because she had better things to do. Cities to build. Heroes to mentor. Wars to win without breaking a nail. You follow her through the chamber, where statues of past heroes line the walls, Odysseus, Perseus, even a slightly scuffed bust of Achilles. All of them, in one way or another, had Athena in their corner. She was the original. Brains behind the brawn. If Ares represents raw strength, Athena is the reason strength matters at all. And here's your quirky tidbit. In some lesser-known traditions, Athena wasn't just a goddess of wisdom and war, but also of weaving. Not just in a metaphorical sense, actual loom and thread stuff. She supposedly invented the flute, too, though she tossed it aside after seeing how weird it made her cheeks look when she played it. Even goddesses have selfie standards. As you stroll past a mural of the infamous contest between Athena and Poseidon, where she won the patronage of Athens by offering an olive tree, while Poseidon offered a salty spring that nobody asked for, she stops and points. They chose utility over flash. Always a good sign. But she also frowns. And yet, even my city often forgot why they chose me. Mortals are excellent at forgetting. You nod slowly, wondering what it's like to be revered for a virtue people forget they need until it's too late. No one throws parades for strategy until the battle is over. No one praises the thinker when the warrior is louder. Athena turns again, gaze softening a little. Don't worry. You won't remember everything. But maybe when you wake, you'll remember how it felt. That's a start. The owl hoots again, a little smug this time, as if it scored some kind of rhetorical point. Athena raises one eyebrow. Don't let him bully you. He's been reading Plato again. You stifle a laugh, though she probably heard it anyway. And then, as quickly as you arrived, she gestures you onward. There's more to see. Keep moving. The gods are not patient. You hesitate at the threshold, one foot in logic, the other in legend. Athena offers a final word, soft but sharp. Wisdom isn't knowing everything. It's knowing what to ignore. You step forward. The owl flutters behind you once, as if to double-check you're not going to trip over your own epiphanies. The chamber fades behind you, replaced by the sound of distant waves and something slithering? Of course. You're heading toward Poseidon. The scent hits you first, brine, seaweed, and that deep, mineral tang that only comes from water older than time. It's thick in the air now, and the sound of waves rolls through the stone corridors, though you're nowhere near the actual ocean. The walls grow damp as you move, slick with condensation, the floor grooved from ages of water flow. You half expect fish to swim by. Then the corridor opens up, and there he is. Poseidon. Towering, trident in hand, beard like a storm cloud, sea foam trailing behind him as if the tide personally follows his footsteps. If Zeus is the CEO with a thunderbolt, and Ares is the chaotic bouncer, Poseidon is that unpredictable uncle who could either save your life or turn your house into a coral reef because you forgot his birthday. He sees you and grunts. Not unfriendly, not exactly welcoming either. Like a fisherman sizing up a new deckhand who might be seasick before lunch. You offer a cautious greeting. He doesn't bother responding right away. He just gestures toward a giant tidal pool in the middle of the chamber. The water churns, glowing faintly, and you realize it's not just water, it's stories. Scenes from past shipwrecks, sea battles, even a very confused-looking dolphin playing a lyre. Poseidon, god of the sea, earthquakes, and horses. Yes, horses. Weird combo, right? But to the ancient Greeks, it all made a certain sense. Horses were once seen as ocean creatures, wild, powerful, hard to tame. The Greeks believed Poseidon created the first horse, possibly while trying to impress a love interest. Historians still argue whether it was Demeter or just the creative phase he went through. You notice the floor tremble faintly with each of his steps. That's no accident. Earthquakes? Totally his thing. He's even called the Earthshaker. Not subtle. And just like Zeus and Hades, Poseidon drew lots for his domain after the Olympians overthrew Cronus. While Hades got the underworld and Zeus the sky, Poseidon was handed the sea. Not a bad deal, except that the ocean, while majestic, is also utterly uncontrollable. Which fits. Poseidon's temper is legendary. You remember that time he lost the contest for Athens to Athena? Yeah, didn't take it well. Flooded the region. Not petty at all. He also cursed Odysseus with 10 years of wandering just because Odysseus blinded his Cyclops son. Not exactly forgiveness-forward behavior. And yet, sailors worshipped him like their lives depended on it, because they did. Every journey across the Mediterranean began with a prayer and a sacrifice. You could anger Zeus and maybe get away with it. But Poseidon? You'd end up shipwrecked and yelling at gulls. You ask about Atlantis. He raises one eyebrow, then shrugs. Nice place. For a while. That's it. That's all you get. He doesn't elaborate. Of course he doesn't. There's a fringe theory that Poseidon once ruled Atlantis before its downfall, and that the city's destruction was not a moral lesson, but a power struggle gone wrong between gods and demigods. Scholars still argue whether the myth originated with Plato's political commentary or older oral traditions warped by centuries of retelling. But Poseidon doesn't seem particularly interested in arguing. He's focused now on a massive conch shell resting on a coral pedestal. He lifts it, blows into it, and the sound echoes like a deep, groaning whale call across the chamber. Chilling, ancient, and oddly majestic. You feel the pressure in your ears change. The water in the pool ripples in response. The air itself seems to hold its breath. And then, in that echoing silence, Poseidon speaks. You think the sea is about waves. But it's about silence. Depth. What drowns you is not the storm, it's how long you're alone after it passes. You blink, unsure whether to nod or apologize. He continues, now pacing along the edge of the tidal pool, each step leaving behind flickers of kelp and sand. Mortals build cities, but I erase coastlines. That doesn't sound like a threat. It sounds like a reminder. Poseidon isn't just about the ocean's beauty. He is the ocean. All of it. That gorgeous turquoise shimmer, and the dark trench that swallows ships whole. His domain is not built for comfort, it's built for all. And just when you think he might dismiss you with a salt-soaked wave of his hand, he does something surprising. He laughs. It's not soft. It's not pretty. It sounds like rocks grinding underwater. But it's a laugh. A real one. You're still standing, he says, almost fondly. You resist the urge to check your shoes for sea cucumbers. I like that. And with that, he hands you something, smooth, rounded, and wet. A polished shell, shaped vaguely like an ear. Listen, he says. You raise it, and for a moment, all the sounds of the world are sucked away. You hear nothing, and everything. The sea. Screams. Laughter. Wind through sails. Anchors breaking. It's overwhelming and comforting all at once. You lower the shell, breath shaky. Poseidon turns his back to you, already lost in some internal current of thought. The trident glints once more, and he vanishes, like a wave folding back into itself. You step away, slightly damp, slightly wiser. There's a new reverence in you now, not fear exactly, but respect. The kind that comes from seeing something massive and knowing you'll never understand all of it. The corridor ahead shimmers, warmer now. Firelight flickers on the stone. You smell olive oil and metal. Hephaestus awaits. You're still brushing imaginary barnacles off your shoulders when the temperature shifts again, up this time. The damp sea air gives way to dry warmth, the kind you feel in a forge or hovering too close to a pizza oven. You squint down the corridor. It's glowing at the edges, flickering with a light that isn't entirely fire but definitely isn't daylight either. You've reached Hephaestus. The floor under your feet is no longer polished stone. It's charred in places, cracked and soot-streaked, like it's endured countless hammer strikes and molten spills. Sparks flash around corners. Metal clinks in a rhythm that's less music and more heartbeat. Then you see him. Hephaestus isn't posing. He's working. Back hunched, arms thick as temple columns, hands blackened with ash. You watch as he lifts a glowing blade with tongs, dips it into a barrel of water with a violent hiss, then tosses it aside like a crumpled draft. Another failure? Or just practice? Either way, he's not looking up. And here's the strange thing. You've probably heard of him the least, right? Zeus hogs thunder, Aphrodite hogs attention, Ares breaks things, Athena thinks about them. But Hephaestus makes things. Weapons, armor, automatons, thrones that trap people. And maybe that last one is a little passive-aggressive, but still, craft is his dominion. The god of the forge, fire, volcanoes, and deeply uncomfortable family dynamics. His story starts rough. Born to Hera alone, depending on the version, she created him without Zeus just to prove she could. But when she saw he was ugly, or perhaps just different, he had a twisted foot or a limp, she tossed him off Mount Olympus. Like, literally hurled him. That part's agreed upon, but historians still argue whether she did it from shame, fear, or just divine pettiness at its finest. Hephaestus fell for a full day before landing in the sea. Some say sea nymphs rescued him. Others say he built his first forge underwater. Either way, he survived, and instead of brooding, he got busy. You shuffle into the workshop as Hephaestus finally glances your way. One eyebrow rises, unimpressed. Another one? You nod awkwardly. He shrugs. Just don't touch anything. Fair enough. You've already seen what happens when gods get moody. No need to accidentally ignite a celestial warhead. The walls are lined with tools, hammers the size of bar stools, calipers made of bronze and bone, gears spinning in place with no visible power source. Nearby, something shaped vaguely like a lion stretches and yawns, its jaw lined with glowing rivets. You realize it's mechanical, and it's watching you. Hephaestus notices. Don't worry. He only bites intruders. You force a smile, which doesn't comfort the lion or yourself. He turns back to his forge and keeps speaking without looking at you. They don't remember what I've built. Just that I limp. And that's the thing, isn't it? The gods of Olympus are all excess, beauty, rage, desire. But Hephaestus? He's endurance. Quiet labor. Pain turned into productivity. He's what happens when you can't afford to shatter, so you mold yourself into something useful. And somehow, through this forged smoke haze of hammering and loneliness, he ends up married to Aphrodite. Yes, that Aphrodite. It's usually told as a punchline: ugly god, hot goddess, awkward couple. Zeus arranged it, likely to avoid more godly drama. Or maybe it was Hera's idea as a strange apology. Scholars still debate whether the union was punishment, pity, or political strategy. But either way, it was never a happy marriage. Aphrodite, unsurprisingly, was not faithful. Her affair with Ares was the worst kept secret on Olympus. Hephaestus found out, and did what he does best: he built something. A delicate golden net, invisible and unbreakable. He caught them mid-act and summoned the other gods to witness. Divine Realities Show, Ancient Edition. Was it revenge? Justice? Just another craft project? You're not sure, and neither are historians. But one thing is clear: Hephaestus had power, not the flashy kind, but the enduring kind. His creations outlasted tempers and gossip. He forged Achilles' armor, made Hermes' winged sandals, and constructed palaces that defied gravity. And here's a strange tidbit for you: some versions of myths say Hephaestus also built automata, golden women who could speak and move on their own, like early robots. The ancient Greeks imagined AI long before Siri. He even made tripods that walked themselves back to his workshop. So yes, your smart vacuum is basically a tribute to a god. You ask him hesitantly if it ever hurt, being exiled, rejected, cheated on. He doesn't look up, but you hear it in his voice. Of course. Then he adds, but pain burns out. Steel remains. There's nothing left to say, really. You watch as he shapes a blade from molten metal, every swing of the hammer precise. It's not about rage. It's about focus. And just before you go, he says something softer. I made you something. You blink. What? He gestures to a workbench, where a small object sits. You walk over. It's a charm, bronze and obsidian, shaped like a tiny anvil. It won't protect you, he says, but it'll remind you to rebuild. You nod, pocket it, and thank him quietly. The heat lessens behind you. The corridor cools. You hear laughter, high-pitched, echoing. Smells like honey and jealousy. You're heading towards someone a little more complicated. Aphrodite is waiting. You expect petals, perfume, maybe some seductive harp music. But as you step forward, it's oddly normal. The scent is pleasant but subtle, like fresh roses on clean linen. The lighting is soft, flattering in a way that makes your reflection look 12% more attractive, and the air has that weird calm you only find in spas or luxury train cars. Aphrodite is already watching you. She doesn't sit. She reclines. Not in laziness, but in absolute control. Draped in silk that changes color when she moves, like oil on water, she radiates beauty. And it's not the Instagram filter kind. It's more like your brain bends a little trying to process her. She's both everything you've ever wanted and everything you know better than to touch. Finally, she says, sighing like you've kept her waiting. You haven't. But time moves strangely here, especially around Aphrodite. Born from sea foam, they say. Technically from the sea foam that formed when Uranus's, well, when his severed bits met the ocean. Yeah. Romantic, right? Ancient mythology doesn't always care about dinner party appropriate origin stories. Aphrodite rose fully formed from that frothy splash, stepping onto a scalloped shell and casually redefining what it meant to be divine. Even the gods were stunned. She arrives, and everything changes. Doves coo louder. Grass gets greener. People fall in love faster and argue longer. You sit, or rather, hover at a respectful distance. She studies you like an artist inspecting a lump of marble, deciding whether it's worth chiseling. So, she says, what did he say about me? It takes you a second to realize she means Hephaestus. You hesitate. She waves a hand. Let me guess. Something about betrayal. Or nets. You nod cautiously. She rolls her eyes gorgeously. They always forget, she mutters, that I never asked for that marriage. And that's true. Zeus married her off to avoid fights. The gods were already bickering over who'd get to claim her. So, in classic Zeus fashion, he tried to fix a cosmic beauty contest with a politically convenient wedding. Aphrodite was paired with Hephaestus, not for compatibility, but because he was the least likely to cause further drama. Of course, that didn't work. Because then came Ares. Yes, she had an affair with the god of war. And yes, the trap was embarrassing. But here's the thing no one really talks about. Aphrodite and Ares were a surprisingly stable match. Fire and fire. Passion and destruction. A wildly dysfunctional power couple, but one that actually made emotional sense. She leans forward now, voice softer. Do you think love is gentle? You're not sure how to answer. She smiles, not kindly. Love burns. It transforms. People worship me not because I was sweet, but because I changed them. And she did. Every mortal, every god, even the other goddesses, reacted to her. She had a girdle, belt, not shapewear, that made her completely irresistible. Paris of Troy famously picked her as the fairest, and in return got Helen, who happened to be married to someone else. Cue the Trojan War. Oops. Historians still argue whether that story was political allegory, divine meddling, or just a cautionary tale about making decisions based on looks. You ask her if she regrets any of it. Aphrodite tilts her head, hair catching the light like a halo and a flame all at once. Regret? She echoes. I am desire itself. Do you regret blinking? Okay, fair. She stands now, and you realize she's taller than you thought. Not physically, but in presence. You feel like you've shrunk slightly, or maybe the room just rearranged itself to match her mood. Then, unexpectedly, she softens. I do wish Hephaestus had seen himself the way I did, she says. His hands made beauty. He never believed he was it. You blink. That almost sounds like affection? But then she flicks her fingers, and the thought dissolves. Anyway, she adds, you're not here to psychoanalyze gods. You're here to survive them. She reaches for something behind her, something glowing. It's a mirror. Not ornate. Just sharp. And alive in that mythic way where objects might judge you. Look, she commands. You do. The mirror doesn't reflect your face. It shows everyone who's ever loved you, romantically, platonically, awkwardly. Some faces you expected. Others catch you off guard. One or two make your heart squeeze. Love, she says, isn't about perfection. It's about obsession. About who you can't stop looking at, even when you know you should. You look again. The mirror shifts. Now it shows who you have loved. And lost. And wished you hadn't. Then it goes blank. Aphrodite takes it back, her expression unreadable. She stores it away like a weapon. Or a keepsake. That's enough sentimentality, she says briskly. You've got more gods to meet. You ask about Eros, her son sometimes. Or maybe not her son. Or maybe not hers alone. The family tree gets thorny. He's the god of love too, but more chaotic. Eros, attraction, pure impulse control. She smirks. Eros? Please! That boy just weaponized everything I taught him. You ask about her Roman counterpart, Venus. Was she really that different? Venus got PR, Aphrodite says dryly. I got poets. She got empires. You almost thank her. but realize that might sound condescending. Instead, you nod respectfully. And maybe you imagine it, but for a split second, she winks. Then she waves her hand again, and the corridor behind her opens. It smells like laurel, olive oil, and ink. Off you go, she says. Time to meet the thinker. Athena's turn. You step away from love incarnate and straight into the cool, dry breath of a library. No fanfare. No perfume. Just silence. Deep, padded silence that swallows your footsteps like a librarian with a grudge. It smells like old papyrus, freshly oiled leather, and the faintest whiff of burnt toast. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hoots, not cute and sleepy, but sharp, like it just corrected your grammar in Latin. This is Athena's domain. You almost expect her to be behind a desk, glasses perched on her nose, sighing at your tardiness. But instead, she's standing in the center of the room, arms crossed, armored but elegant. Her helmet glows faintly in the low light, and her spear rests against the table stacked with scrolls arranged in a gradient from possibly useful to definitely explosive. She doesn't greet you. She assesses you. You're not limping, she says. Good. Fewer variables. You open your mouth to speak. She holds up a hand. Let me guess. You've met Aphrodite. You're emotionally confused, slightly dazzled, and probably misinformed. Okay then. Athena, goddess of wisdom, strategy, law, justice, and the kind of logical precision that makes you check your thermostat twice. She sprang fully formed from Zeus's forehead, literally. After he swallowed her mother, Metis, don't ask, he developed a splitting headache. Hephaestus split Zeus's skull open, no anesthesia, naturally, and out popped Athena, already dressed for battle. Historians still argue whether this myth was metaphor, male insecurity, or ancient Greece's way of making birth control extremely dramatic. She's not the goddess of war exactly, Ares has that title, but he represents brute force and chaos. Athena is war with rules. Chess instead of bar fights. She's the strategist, the long game, the one who wins by not fighting unless it's absolutely necessary. You glance around her sanctum. There are maps layered in concentric circles, dioramas of cities under siege, and tiny figurines that move on their own when Athena points at them. She's teaching herself 13 simultaneous versions of the Trojan War, testing each possible outcome. In one, Achilles lives. In another, he never goes to Troy at all. You see a version where Helen never leaves Sparta and the entire Greek economy collapses from boredom. Athena notices you staring. Cause and effect, she says. Humans rarely appreciate how fragile it is. You ask what it's like, being a goddess of so many things. Justice and war? Wisdom and weaving? Because yes, Athena is also the goddess of crafts. She invented the chariot, the bridle, and according to fringe sources, the flute. She also cursed it when she realized it made her cheeks puff out unflatteringly. Even goddesses have limits. Balance, she says simply. That's all it is. You weigh what you can control against what you must endure. You get the feeling that was a jab at someone. Possibly everyone. You mention Medusa, carefully. Her expression doesn't change. Ah, Medusa. The story is a tangle of versions, but the most widely known one. Medusa was once a priestess in Athena's temple. Depending on the telling, she was seduced, or assaulted, by Poseidon there. Athena, rather than punishing Poseidon because, well, hierarchy, transformed Medusa into a gorgon with snakes for hair and a gaze that turned people to stone. Historians still argue whether Athena did this out of wrath, pity, protection, or all three tangled together. She broke the vow, Athena says coolly. The consequences were disproportionate. That's all she offers. Not apology. Not defense. Just calculus. You step carefully around a floating model of Athens. It glows softly, pulsing with golden light. She gestures to it, finally warming a little. This was my city. I won it by offering the olive tree. Poseidon offered a salt spring. They picked wisdom, civilization, economy. You nod. The olive tree turned out to be an incredibly smart long-term investment, used for food, oil, even ceremonial lamp fuel. Not flashy, but indispensable. Athena stares at the little city model as if it could still surprise her. They say I don't feel, she murmurs, that I'm all logic. But I chose that city because I believed in what people could become. She turns to you fully now. Do you know what separates intelligence from wisdom? You shake your head. Intelligence solves problems. Wisdom prevents them. She lets that hang in the air like a sword over a throne. You're starting to wonder how she gets along with the other gods. Probably the same way a chess grandmaster gets along at a pie-eating contest. But even Athena has moments. Her rivalry with Arachne is legendary. A mortal weaver who challenged Athena and won, or nearly did. The girl's tapestry depicted the gods behaving badly. Technically accurate, but socially unwise. Athena destroyed it and turned Arachne into a spider. Eternal weaving. Poetic justice? Petty revenge? Historians still debate it. Perfection is dangerous, Athena says quietly. It attracts punishment. You almost ask who she's afraid of, but the question dies in your throat. She points to a book on a pedestal. You approach, expecting mythic poetry or esoteric philosophy. But the pages are blank. Write something, she says. You hesitate. What should I write? She doesn't blink. Something true. You think for a while. Then you write the first thing that feels real. Maybe it's a name, a regret, a hope. When you finish, the words glow briefly, then disappear. Athena nods. That will do. And that's the thing about her. She doesn't demand devotion. She demands effort. The kind that makes your brain ache and your soul stretch. The kind you won't forget. She waves you toward the next hall, already back at her models. War drums faintly echo in the distance, but she doesn't flinch. You do, because it's time for Ares. The corridor grows warmer as you leave Athena's sanctum behind. The walls feel closer, the air thicker. Each step pulses through the stone floor, like you're walking directly into someone's heartbeat. You smell iron, leather, and that familiar metallic note that blood always leaves behind. No mistaking it now. You're entering Ares' territory. There's no grand throne. No banners waving in pride. Just an arena, quiet, dusty, and strewn with discarded weapons. The kind of place where echoes linger longer than people do. And in the center of it, Ares. He's exactly what you expect, and not at all what you want to deal with before bed. Massive, armored like someone who gets dressed by slamming into a weapons rack, and radiating the energy of a guy who'd argue with a stop sign just to feel something. His spear is stabbed lazily into the ground next to him, and he's cleaning his nails with a dagger the size of a baguette. You look soft, he says. Athena let you out early? You nod, resisting the urge to correct his grammar. Not worth it. Ares, god of war, real war. Not the kind with strategy and treaties. Not the kind that involves maps and diplomacy. Ares is about rage, fury, bloodlust. The thick, messy part of conflict that doesn't get recorded in elegant scrolls. The kind where screaming drowns out thought, and survival means swinging faster than the other guy. And the gods? They barely tolerated him. The Greeks respected his power, sure, but they didn't like him. Even Zeus found him exhausting. Hephaestus found him idiotic. Athena found him predictable. Still, Ares had his moments. He was terrifying, yes, but in that oddly magnetic. Definitely makes bad choices, but somehow still has a fan club kind of way. Like a walking red flag in a leather skirt. One of the most infamous parts of Ares' mythology? His affair with Aphrodite. And oh, it was messy. Aphrodite, technically married to Hephaestus, couldn't resist Ares' energy. They met in secret. Well, they tried. But one day, Hephaestus got suspicious. So he made an invisible net. Delicate, magical, and just the right size to trap two careless lovers mid-cuddle. Which it did. Right in the act. Hephaestus invited all the gods to come take a look. The ancient version of live streaming the drama. Poseidon laughed. Hermes made jokes. Apollo took bets. Historians still argue whether it was a warning, performance art, or divine reality TV. Ares doesn't seem embarrassed by the story. He smirks. She liked a man who wasn't afraid to get messy. You, wisely, do not reply. He starts pacing the arena, dragging a sword behind him. Sparks jump from the stone floor. You know what the others don't get, he says. They talk about war like it's this ugly necessity. But it's honest. You don't lie in a fight. You don't pretend. You survive or you don't. That might be the most philosophy he's ever uttered. And for all his chaos, Ares did have children. Lots of them. Some were literal monsters. Others were personifications of battle, like Phobos and Deimos, fear and terror, who rode beside him in his chariot. Every time the sky thundered with war cries, they were there. Not leading armies. Fueling them. You glance at a dented shield hanging on the wall. It has hundreds of notches carved into it, like a very violent calendar. One for every conflict Ares ever sparked, or maybe just the ones he found entertaining. There's a little pile of helmets in the corner. Child-sized. Your stomach turns. Ares shrugs. Victory's not pretty. He walks up to a war drum and strikes it once. The sound rattles through your ribs like a punch. You're not in the arena anymore. You're standing on the edge of a battlefield, dust rising, hooves pounding, 1,000 voices screaming for glory, for revenge, for no reason at all. Then it's gone. You blink and you're back in the arena. Ares watches you closely. You felt it, he says. The rush. The danger. That's real. Maybe. But it's not comforting. Ares was once caught by the Elodie twins, Attis and Ephialtes. They stuffed him into a bronze jar for 13 months. Not exactly an epic prison break tale. He had to be rescued by Hermes. 13 months of muffled rage. Historians still debate if it was meant as comic relief or a deeply symbolic jab at unchecked masculinity. You ask why he keeps fighting. Isn't he tired? He sneers. Tired is for mortals. War never sleeps. Conflict never ends. You think just because one empire falls, another doesn't rise hungry? That feels unfairly accurate. But here's the thing. For all his violence, Ares isn't evil. He's an embodiment. A force. He doesn't start wars. Humans do. He just shows up to watch them burn. You start to understand why the Greeks were wary of him. Not because he lied, but because he didn't. He gestures toward the exit. You'll meet my daughter soon. She's smarter than I am. Scarier, too. He means Eris, the goddess of discord. Perfect. But as you turn to leave, Ares does something unexpected. He places a hand on your shoulder. Try not to pick a side until you've seen them all. Then he's gone. Dissolved into shadow and heat. You stand alone in the silent arena. And you realize something else. Ares may not be a good bedtime companion. But he is honest. And sometimes, that's the scariest part. You step from Ares' furnace-hot Colosseum into something far more unsettling. Silence, yes, but not the hushed kind of a temple or scroll-filled library. No, this is the brittle, waiting silence before a chair tips. The pause after a loaded sentence. The half-second before a toddler flips over the board game just to watch the world burn. Welcome to Ares. It's not clear if you're indoors or outdoors. The walls move when you try to focus on them. The ceiling has cracks that slither like gossip. The floor is checkered like a chessboard. But some squares are missing, others scream when stepped on, and one is made of couscous for reasons you're absolutely not ready to unpack. Eris herself isn't seated or standing. She's draped. Draped across a velvet sofa that wasn't there a moment ago, stroking a golden apple and humming a tune that sounds suspiciously like the Jeopardy theme with extra malice. So, she says, you've met the gods who pretend to be orderly. She doesn't ask your name. Of course not. Names are just labels. and Eris loves pulling those off like band-aids. She tosses the apple in your direction. You flinch. It hovers, glows, spins slowly in midair. And there it is, the apple of discord. The one with the words, "To the Ferris," carved into its side in delicate curse script. The one that started the biggest mythological conflict in Greek history. All because Eris wasn't invited to a party. She grins. I don't like parties, but I do enjoy what happens after. You already know this story, but now you're living in its echo. Eris, miffed that she'd been left off the guest list for the wedding of Peleus and Thetis, rolled that apple across the banquet floor like a bowling ball of doom. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite all lunged for it. Because of course they did. Zeus, like any dad facing 3 angry daughters and a cursed fruit, panicked and appointed Paris, a mortal Trojan prince, to judge. The goddesses each offered him a bride, power, wisdom, and love. Paris chose Aphrodite's promise of the most beautiful woman in the world. That woman? Helen of Sparta. Oops. The Trojan War followed, and thousands died. All because one goddess wanted to prove a point. Historians still argue whether this myth is a cautionary tale about vanity, a metaphor for political manipulation, or just ancient Greece's way of saying, never host potlucks. Eris stretches, cat-like. I never told them what to do. I just nudged. She snaps her fingers, and the world around you rearranges. You're suddenly in a bustling marketplace. Then a battlefield. Then a family reunion gone horribly, horribly wrong. Each scene dissolves into shouting, blame, and eventual collapse. The common denominator? One small misunderstanding, carefully introduced. You don't need armies, she whispers. You just need the right word in the right ear. Eris is not evil. Not in the red horns and pitchfork way. She's chaos, the kind that's always bubbling beneath the surface. The kind that lives in social media comments and family group texts. The kind that feeds on insecurity, then spins it into opera. You ask why she's like this? She raises an eyebrow. Why is gravity downward? Why does toast fall butter side first? There's something ancient about her. Older than Zeus. Older than the Olympians. Some versions say she's a daughter of Nyx, the primordial night. Not bound by Olympus. Not interested in thrones or temples. Just ripples. Fun fringe tidbit? There's a small but stubborn cult that considers Eris a patron of pranksters and rebels. They claim she's not just goddess of strife, but also of necessary upheaval. Of growth through discomfort. The kind of chaos that clears the board so something new can begin. She picks up the apple again, runs her thumb along its edge. You think discord is always bad, she says. But tell me, what's more honest than a fight? You glance around, hoping for an exit. She rolls her eyes. You've seen love. You've seen war. You've seen wisdom and invention. But none of it means anything without choice. And choice, she says, standing now, means risk. She's taller than she looks when reclining. Her dress shimmers with static, like a screen stuck between channels. Her eyes glow faintly red, not evil, just disruptive. Like she's already rearranging their sentences before you say them. You think the gods fight for fun? She continues. They fight because of me. They build, marry, curse, rage, and create, all because I poke something delicate. The smallest stone starts the avalanche. You finally ask, are you proud of the Trojan War? She shrugs. It was instructive. And here's the eerie thing. Despite all the destruction, you realize Eris never forced anyone. She didn't cast spells. Didn't use weapons. She just whispered. And everyone else did the rest. She takes one last look at you, then smirks. You'll be fun to watch. The door out appears with a sarcastic creak. You step through quickly, but behind you, the apple hovers in place, still gleaming. The air shifts again. Less charged. Calmer, maybe, but not quite safe. Because up next, you're heading for the underworld. It's not dark when you enter the underworld. That would be too easy. Instead, it's gray. Uniform. Drained. Like someone washed the colors and forgot to add fabric softener. The air smells faintly of wet stone, wilted laurel, and that weird temple moss scent no one can quite describe. It doesn't feel dead, exactly, it feels done. Finished. This is a place where stories don't get written, they stop. You don't walk in. You descend. The path spirals downward, each step an echo, each echo a little less eager than the last. The ground is smooth. Too smooth. You suspect it's worn by more than footsteps. Maybe tears. Maybe time. Maybe both. And standing at the bottom, framed by columns carved with weeping figures, is Hades. No flames. No pitchfork. No dramatic villain cape flapping in the shadows. Just a solemn man in a dark robe, posture precise, hands clasped like someone about to give a very long TED talk on estate planning. "Welcome," he says. You nod. Cautiously. Hades is not the villain Disney made him out to be. The Greeks didn't hate him. They just avoided him. Because let's be real, no one wants to chat with the landlord of death. He wasn't the god of dying. He was the god of what happens next. The Greeks called the underworld by many names, Hades, yes, but also Erebos, the gloom, and sometimes just the house. Like it was an inevitability you'd one day visit. Forever. You hear a dog growl softly in the background. No mistaking that. Cerberus. 3 heads, all currently snoozing in different directions. One dreams. One gnaws on a bone. The last one glares at you like you've interrupted something sacred. Hades waves you forward. The first thing you notice is how organized everything is. This isn't a chaotic realm of flying souls and screaming wraiths. It's efficient. The river Styx flows in lazy, obedient loops. Souls queue in lines like exhausted commuters. There's even a lost and found, manned by a ghost who looks like he was underpaid in life and continues to be underpaid in death. Most mortals expect fire, Hades mutters. But fire's for cleansing. Here, it's about memory. He leads you to a balcony. Below, you see fields, some lush, some gray, some blazing red. The asphodel meadows stretch endlessly, where ordinary souls drift like static. Not punished. Not rewarded. Just present. Like background extras in their own afterlife. Further off, the Elysian fields, reserved for heroes and the blessed. There's music. Dancing. Maybe a toga party or two. And then there's Tartarus. A pit. Not metaphorical. A literal pit, where the worst offenders, titans, oath-breakers, cosmic-level disappointments, are trapped for eternity. You hear a distant, rhythmic clang. Probably Sisyphus and his boulder. Or maybe it's Tantalus, reaching for the fruit he'll never eat. Historians still argue whether these myths were moral lessons or the world's oldest motivational posters. Hades turns to you. "I didn't make the rules," he says. "I just enforced them." You ask about Persephone. Ah. Now his expression shifts. Softens. Not by much, but enough that you see it. The tale's complicated, and depending on who you ask, it's a love story, a tragedy, or a metaphor for the agricultural cycle. Persephone, daughter of Demeter, was taken by Hades, maybe kidnapped, maybe courted, maybe something murkier in between. He offered her a throne, a kingdom, a sense of power she'd never tasted on Olympus. She ate pomegranate seeds. And because of those seeds, 3 or 6, or however many depending on the version, she was bound to the underworld part of the year. Hence the seasons, winter when Demeter mourns, spring when Persephone returns. But the way Hades speaks her name? It's careful. Not possessive. Reverent, maybe. "She rules with me," he says. "Not under me." A fringe version of the myth even suggests Persephone chose to stay. That she saw the power in becoming queen of the inevitable. And honestly, that checks out. You pass a grove of cypress trees, silent, knotted, ancient. There's a riverbank nearby. The souls of the unburied hover there, fidgeting with their spectral hands. They can't cross until they're properly mourned. That's when you see Charon, tall, gaunt, fairy pole in hand. He doesn't speak, just holds out a hand. You're about to apologize for not having a coin when Hades clears his throat. They're with me. Charon grunts and looks mildly disappointed, like a bouncer denied a bribe. You ask Hades if he ever leaves the underworld. Rarely, he says. The living don't welcome me, and the dead don't travel. That's not strictly true. Orpheus once descended here to retrieve Eurydice. Nearly made it, too, until he turned around too soon. Then there was Heracles, who wrestled Cerberus out as one of his labors. And don't forget Theseus and Pirithous, who tried to kidnap Persephone and got stuck to magical chairs for their trouble. Hades leads you to a stone archway where the air seems lighter. You've seen the end of things, he says. Time to see what came before. And just like that, you're rising. The underworld falls away. The air sharpens. The stars spin faster. Next up, the beginning of the cosmos. The primordial gods are waiting. You're not flying upwards so much as unraveling. Everything familiar, your feet, your sense of direction, your concept of what gravity should be doing, melts quietly into static. There's no sun up here. No moon either. Just layers. As if the universe has been peeled back like an onion, and you're drifting somewhere between the first thought and the first breath. This is what the Greeks called chaos. And not the Eros-style drama queen chaos you met earlier. No, this is deeper. Primeval. The soft exhale before anything began. You're floating in nothingness, but it's not empty. It's pregnant with potential. And just as your mind starts to ache from the lack of reference points, you sense something massive shifting. Gaia. You can't really see her, not all at once. She's the earth, but not the crust and soil kind. She's presence. Groundedness. The first solidity in the murk. She's forming herself from the fog around you, blooming into a shape made of valleys and cliffs and heartbeat. The sound she makes isn't speech, it's tectonic. And where there is Gaia, there is Uranus. He comes after, above, stretching infinitely, a sky god whose embrace becomes both shelter and prison. Their union brings more than just poetic metaphors. Titans, cyclopes, hundred-handed giants. All birthed from a mother who was the earth, and a father who was the sky. But let's not sugarcoat this part. Greek creation myths are weird. Uranus is less of a supportive dad and more of a cosmic hoarder. Terrified of being overthrown, he shoves his children back into Gaia's womb. Not figuratively. Like back in. Gaia, understandably furious, fashions a sickle and hands it to her son Cronus. You can guess where this goes. Yes. Cronus ambushes Uranus and relieves him of his, patriarchal authority. Historians still argue whether this moment represents rebellion, evolution, or just an unusually brutal puberty metaphor. Cronus, now king of the cosmos, does exactly what you'd expect from someone who got to the top by betrayal. He starts panicking that he'll be overthrown too. So, he eats his kids. Again, literally. Babies swallowed whole. It's not great. One of those babies, though, Zeus, gets smuggled away by clever Rhea, his mom, raised in secret, then comes back with thunder in his pocket and a deep resentment of digestive trauma. Eventually, Zeus overthrows Cronus, slices open his dad's gut, and rescues his siblings. Tada! The Olympians are born. You're watching all of this in some surreal cosmic diorama. Titans rising. Titans falling. Lightning carving the heavens into jagged rulership. It's less peaceful origin of the world, and more intergenerational therapy session with magical weapons. And here's the kicker, none of this was written down at first. These stories passed through centuries of oral tradition. Adjusted. Softened. Inflated. Some versions paint the Titans as noble victims, others as chaos bringers. The gods as heroes, or tyrants. There's a fringe theory, whispered by late-night scholars and exhausted archaeologists, that the Titanomachy, the war between Titans and Olympians, was a coded memory of actual pre-Greek cultures being overtaken by newer ones. Not literal sky battles, but symbolic shifts in who got to tell the story. You're floating now beside Nyx, night itself. Her wings are made of quiet. Her children include Hypnos, sleep, Thanatos, death, and Moros, doom. It's a family reunion of concepts no one wants to RSVP to, but here they are. And still, it's peaceful. This part of the myth isn't cluttered with cheating or war or backstabbing dinner parties. It's simpler, older, less about personality, more about essence. Gaia, Uranus, Nyx, Kronos, time itself. These weren't gods you prayed to. These were forces you endured. Eventually, the Olympians take over. They bring more drama, more poetry, better hair. But the primordial deities never leave. They linger behind the curtain, watching, waiting. You feel it now, something closing in your chest. Not panic, not fear, just finality. You've walked with mortals and gods, slept in temples, heard thunder crash, watched jealousy burn. You've seen a golden apple start a war, and a pomegranate split a season in two. And now you've traced it all back to where it started, in nothingness, in chaos. You're weightless again. Not in space, in meaning. Because if the Greeks gave us anything, it's not just myths. It's questions. Why do we fight? Why do we hope? Why do we keep falling in love with people who absolutely should come with warning labels? And most of all, how do we keep going? You hear a voice behind you. It's not one you recognize, but it's warm, patient, almost amused. All stories end here, it says. But endings are just beginnings we've told backward. You blink. You're back where you started. The stars above. The mountain paths. A soft wind rustling cypress trees. Somewhere far off, someone singing. And your journey is over. Now, let go. Let's wind down, shall we? The air now is gentler. Every sound has softened at the edges, like someone smoothed the corners off reality with velvet. You feel your breath moving slower in your chest, your eyes blinking heavier. Each blink a little longer than the last. Whatever images still flicker through your mind, golden apples, whispering rivers, jealous gods, weary ghosts, they're distant now. Less like memories and more like dreams dissolving with the dawn. There's no need to carry them forward. Let the myths rest. Let the gods return to their mountains, their seas, their halls of fire and silence. Let your own thoughts drift like petals on a stream, lazy, aimless, peaceful. You've wandered far tonight. Across time. Through chaos. Beneath the stars and beyond the myths. But now, there's no more wandering left to do. Just stillness. Just rest. So sink into it. Let the blankets weigh a little more. Let the hum of your room cradle you like a lullaby older than language. You're safe. You're still. And the story has gone quiet. Sleep well, dream softly.